when you talk about art being therapeutic, there have actually been a number of studies looking at actual patients in the hospital with art, either in the room or not in the room, that show that people with art in the room recovered better, recovered faster, less hospitalization, less postoperative pain than those without. So, yeah, I think there really is a therapeutic benefit both to the practicer and the audience of art.
Hello and welcome to episode 62 of the Photo Country podcast. I have been trying to make my episodes more regular in nature, but unfortunately, life and sometimes work gets in the way. Better late than never, here is episode 62. In this episode, I had the pleasure and honor of chatting with Dr. Howard Grith, a retired cardiologist from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Like many of my guests, he popped up on my feed on Instagram, and I was quite intrigued by the short videos he was putting out about his art. He's not only a photographer but also an artist who dabbles in abstracts. He loves double exposure photography. As he himself says, he is in Act 2 of his life, and what an act it is turning out to be. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Dr. Howard Grith. Thank you, Howard. Thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. I mean, it's not every day I have a cardiologist on my show.
Retired cardiologist. I have time to do the other things now.
Yeah, so the only thing that comes to me is I have a great title for the show. A Heart for Art.
There you I like that. I never thought of that. That's pretty good.
So I guess I'm talking to the right person. So you looked into the heart, and now with your art, you're opening up people's hearts.
I like it. I like it.
Right. So were you always interested in art, Howard?
Well, I was always interested in photography ever since grade school. And I photographed for many years. Obviously, when I was in my educational years, I had to put it away for a bit, but I've been photographing for many years. And I always viewed the photography as an art form. So I was mostly interested, not, my wife used to be always pissed at me because I didn't really want to take pictures of my kids and so on. I mean, I could use a cell phone for that. I just wanted to use the real camera, the big camera, for art making. And it's only in the last couple of years when I started doing abstract photography that I decided it would be interesting to learn how to paint and do other things as well.
Right. But you never considered getting into photography as a full-time career?
Maybe when I was a little kid, but not when I after I started college and started getting interested in other things. I was always very interested in science also as a kid. And maybe that's part of what attracted me to the photography. The darkroom, obviously back then, everything was a chemical darkroom. And so I was, as part of the science, I was fascinated as to how can you put this piece of paper in this chemical and all of a sudden you can see a picture arising from it.
In fact, once I was talking to a landscape and a bird photographer, wildlife photographer based in Auckland, and he was saying that photography is almost like is very therapeutic for him. And I heard that from more than one person that it's almost like therapy for them, and it's the aloneness that you have when you go out in nature taking a photograph of nature, and sometimes you come back with nothing. You might not get what you want, but just the act of going there and spending time in nature and spending time with your art does something to you. Do you have the same feeling when you create art?
Yes, I think that's true. For a long time, I was doing landscape photography. And a lot of times you wake up early in the morning. I've done the weekends, wake up early in the morning for sunrise, drive an hour to get somewhere, and it's clouded over and you don't get that sunrise that you were hoping for. But even then, there was something, as you say, therapeutic, something that was very good feeling about getting out when the world wasn't up yet, about being there when the light was just starting to come through for the day. So yeah, I think that's very true. And actually, when you talk about art being therapeutic, there have actually been a number of studies looking at actual patients in the hospital with art either in the room or not in the room. And those, I mean, they weren't huge studies, but they were studies that showed that people with art in the room recovered better, recovered faster, less hospitalization, less postoperative pain than those without. So, yeah, I think there really is a therapeutic benefit both to the practicer and the audience of art.
Right. And in fact, I think I was going through your work, and one of the interesting projects that popped out for me is the work that you did at a hospital. You produced art with some patients, and that
Yeah.
was a very interesting installation where the patients are telling their story and you have their portrait. I think that was really interesting. How did that happen?
Well, medicine here in the US has become more and more, I guess the word would be corporate, and the physicians have less and less time with patients. And for that reason, a lot of times you don't really get at the crux of what the patient's worries are or get to know them as much as a person as you might like. And so I had this idea to, at the end of a visit, ask patients about the things that we don't usually ask about and see if I could take their portrait. And I think the things that we don't usually ask about are, what things would you like your doctor to know about you that they don't know? And what interesting things have happened to your life to let your doctor know you as a person? And so I found some very interesting people that I didn't know their history. I mean, one guy was actually a guard at the Nuremberg
Wow.
trials after World War II. Yeah. What one person used the, I wouldn't even have guessed this. One person was the first person to use echo triangulation during the Korean War. And I had one guy that's an Uber driver that just comes from a fascinating background and left that background because he wanted to interact with people more. And he's as an Uber driver, that's what you do. Had one guy that was the dynamite guy for mining. Yeah, all sorts of interesting people. Then you wouldn't know their story if you hadn't asked them. And yeah, the hospital ultimately put some of their portraits up with the audio recording, which I thought was very nice. And we invited them to come and gave them copies of their portraits. So yeah, it was a very touching evening when it actually opened.
So, what was their reaction to it?
Their reaction was they always said, "Thank you for asking us these questions and thank you for letting us participate in this." And I thought they were doing me a favor by because I had to have them sign. I mean, this is the US. It's very litigious. I had to have them sign consent that they were okay getting their picture taken and that it could be used and I could use their interview. So I felt like they were doing me a favor, which they were. But at the end, they also felt like I contributed something to them. So it was a very positive experience.
And in one of your Instagram posts recently, you did a sort of a introductory video, and you talk about Act One and Act Two. So
I'm enacting that.
exactly. So how do these two acts actually compare?
Well, each has their positives. I certainly enjoy my practicing cardiology, but as you might imagine, it's very time consuming and very all encompassing, especially raising a family at the same time. And I was actually an interventional cardiologist. So we did procedures and got called in the middle of the night frequently and so on. And yet I managed when I came home to at least get a little bit of time and a little bit of time on the weekends to process my photos or go out with some friends to shoot for an hour or two. And it was very good, but it was very focused on more on obviously practicing cardiology and raising family. Now my kids have moved out and I've retired from cardiology, and it gives me a lot more time to do some of these other things that I've really enjoyed. And the amazing thing is, my wife says I should teach a retirement class because even though I now have so much more time, it still feels by the end of the day that I haven't done all the things that I'd like to do. So yeah, I'm really enjoying retirement and getting to do a lot more of these sort of things.
Right. And does having a serious hobby like this, I'm not sure even if you want to call this a hobby, it might be a new occasion or things that occupy your time. How does it help in having a sound body and a sound mind?
Well, first of all, it can be very social. People sort of think of photography or especially nature and landscape, although now I'm doing mostly multiple exposure abstract work as a very sort of one person isolated thing. But actually, I have several friends that are also very interested and live nearby. And we go out together photographing twice a week. And I think that having something that you're very focused on in developing really is good for you. I mean, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of feeling that doing things like this that you become very involved with are probably good for your mind and help decrease the risk of dementia and so on.
How did you start painting?
Well, as I said, I really, for the last couple of years, my photography has evolved over time. I really did started with nature and landscape. Then I wanted to get sort of a little more seeing things in a different way. And I started doing macro. And then I wanted to see things even more differently. So I started using what you might call alternative lenses like Lens Baby, modified Helios lenses, pinhole cameras, Holgas, that sort of thing. And ultimately that evolved, I think, into my doing multiple exposure abstract work, which for the last 2 years is mostly all that I've done because I really find it such an opportunity to be creative and, for lack of a better term, sort of make something out of nothing. And I've really been enjoying that. And now I'm forgetting the question that you asked. I'm going to laugh. What did he ask me again?
No,
Do you remember?
yes.
Just when I said no more dimension with the photography, I can't have a question.
No, I was asking you about your journey into painting from being a photographer.
Oh, yeah.
How did that actually start?
That's right. So one of the things that I've been doing a lot with the abstract work is going to museum and taking artwork and doing multiple exposures of various paintings and sculptures and combining them together so that the finished product looks nothing like any of the originals and would never be called a copy or anything like that. I mean, it's a very different end product that looks nothing like it. And then I just started thinking, well, what would it be like if I could start doing some abstract painting myself and enjoy the painting, but also use the painting to make multiple exposure abstract photos from. And so I started taking some online courses. And like most things that look simple, it's not as simple as it looks. And it's actually pretty challenging. It fits in, I think it folds in very well with photography because especially if you're painting realistically, then a lot of the realism is important, but as is composition. But with abstract work, it's really based solely on composition, shapes, tones, lines, very much like constructing or composing a photo.
Actually, three things that you said actually I can relate to because I have a Lens Baby, I have a Helios, and I love multiple exposures. So, in fact, one of my favorite multiple exposures is what I took of my wife and I superimposed it with a tree, and it's on my
Uh-huh.
it's on my Instagram. I pinned it on my profile, and I think
Okay.
it's multiple exposures are really magical, and I think it's one way of where you can actually combine photography and create something which is really almost like a painting, and you can do
Yeah.
really abstract things with it. So, what was your introduction to the magic of multiple exposures?
Well, if you go into, I mean, different cameras have different multiple exposure options. I happen to use Canon cameras. And with Canon cameras and Nikon also, there are 4 blend modes if you go into the multiple exposure menu. And average is the one that sort of gives you a typical multiple exposure result, similar to a film camera if you did multiple exposure on a film camera. But there were these other blend modes there, lighten and darken. I didn't know what they were. And so I switched to them and tried using them. Came out horrible. I didn't know what they were. And so I said, okay, I should look into this and figure out what they are. And actually, I ended up joining this multiple exposure community online run by two photographers called findyourvoice.art. So wonderful community, and learned a lot there about multiple exposures and learned about those blend modes and how to control them. And all of a sudden, you were able to make things that not only weren't there in terms of the multiple exposures do that, but making wild colors that weren't there and being able to take them into Lightroom or Photoshop and then separate those colors and start to really play very creatively with what started as a photograph.
And were there any influences from early on in terms of your photography and art? Do you have a favorite artist?
I was influenced a lot in photography by Brooks Jensen and Lenswork and this whole idea of projects, of doing photographic projects. And also, he very strongly put forward this idea of photography, not necessarily going to the most obscure places or fighting to get to places no one else has ever been, but rather taking things that are mundane and using the camera to somehow show us a different aspect of them that people hadn't really looked at before. So with photography, he was a big influence, and some of the black and white photographers of the 40s and 50s, and also not a black and white photographer, but Saul Leiter, and then some of the New York street photographers really influenced me. In terms of painting, I'm really sort of moved, and again, it's because of the abstraction, I think, by Mark Rothko and the color field images, paintings, and the way he looked at the way color could influence mood and emotion and so on.
One of your abstract artwork of it's almost the entire canvas is divided into zones of different color and it's divided by curves. I really love that composition.
There's a story behind that. So I have been in Washington, D.C. a number of times because my wife sometimes has meetings for her work there. And there's a national sculpture garden. And in that garden are some modern art sculptures. And one of them is this very old-fashioned typewriter eraser. I don't know if you know the kind with the eraser that's like a wheel that used to roll, and then it would have a little brush on the end for you to brush away the erasure parts.
Yes.
That's why I named it Erasure. And I became fascinated by that. And every time I go to Washington, I'd spend an hour in front of it making these multiple exposure images that look nothing like the original. And then I'd bring them into Photoshop and change the colors and shapes and so on. But yeah, I can't walk past that sculpture without spending time photographing it in all these different blend modes.
It's very interesting, like how such a simple idea could be so powerful. And I also read in one of your interviews that you talk a lot about having an imposter syndrome. So you're feeling that you're not good enough. Do you still have that?
Well, I think everybody has that. And then when you start something new like abstract painting, whatever you manage to push away from that comes roaring back because you're just starting up again. And I think the only way to get through that, I mean, at that point, there's like a fork in the road. You either quit because you say, I'm never going to be able to do this, or you go down that other fork and you say, the only way to get over it is to just keep doing it and keep working. And ultimately you start to feel comfortable with it. And then people start to say, oh, I like that. And then you gain more confidence, and it takes time though. So I feel very confident in my photography. The painting is something that is much newer. And I think just doing the work is the way through that.
Because you always feel like you don't want to look stupid in front of other people.
Yeah. Well, talk about that. It was the same thing. So as you know, I've been doing a lot of videos on Instagram, and for a long time, I said, I'm going to make a video and put myself out there like that. And I ended up looking and seeing some people talking about that and saying, what are you afraid of? Just do it. And the people that have a negative response to it, what are they doing? They're not doing it. They're not putting themselves out there. So just do it. What's the worst that can happen?
Exactly.
So I started doing
Yeah,
it.
that's exactly how you popped up on my feed, because I also had that for a long time. I didn't post on Instagram because I got really sick of the platform, and the algorithm sort of got me. I'm producing for the algorithm, or am I producing for myself? You know that question.
And I think sometimes you do need a break from this sort of thing to sort of more focus internally and do stuff for yourself. But then there's also much as the downside of feeding material for Zuckerberg. On the other hand, if you're not represented by a gallery or something like that, it is an opportunity at least to have some people see your work or give an explanation of your work and see what you're doing.
So how's the response been once you started doing those videos?
The response has been interesting. The response, I think, has been good. It sounds corny, the idea of like building a community, but there are a number of people who really have been responding to the videos. And I try to have a discussion with them because I feel like when I put stuff out there, a lot of people just put things out there that are self-representational in terms of trying to get their work out there, having people buy their work or get involved with their work. But I feel like in order to build a community, you need to also provide things for others. So in addition to putting my work out there, I'm also trying to make some educational videos. I'm trying to make some how-to videos, some photography idea videos, and also some interesting art discussion type of videos and hearing people's opinion on things. And so I think that I've had somewhat of a positive response to that, and I enjoy doing it. So I've been doing it.
So what's your current or latest project that you've been working on? Is there something that you can share?
I've been doing some work in the museum near my house. There's some display of neon lights in various different shapes. And it's the sort of thing like, you can walk by something 100 times, 1,000 times and never pay any attention. Then one day you're walking by it and something hits you and you say, oh, I have an idea for that. So I started doing long exposure ICMs, intentional camera movement, of those neon lights and getting these very sort of futuristic science fiction type images where the light is no longer the shape of the neon bulb, but it's sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey when they're going down the wormhole. And then if you start doing it with multiple exposures and changing your white balance in between those exposures, you start to get some very psychedelic type of stuff. So that's a little project that I've been working on lately. That, and there's a botanical garden near my house, and they have inside the greenhouse, they have a pond, and there's a fountain in the pond. And when the fountain is on, you get these reflections of the ceiling of the greenhouse in the pond with these ripples. And by sort of getting close, these ripples, even in just single frames, make these wild, abstract, psychedelic shapes and forms. So those two things sort of fit together.
So as we wind down the conversation, I want to touch upon a few things before we close.
Okay.
One is, I see on your feed that you were talking about starting a multiple exposure course.
Yes.
Right. So I want to hear something about that. And as well as for someone who's starting out, has this sort of voice in your head saying, should I do it? Should I not do it? Will I be good enough? Will I have something interesting to say on Instagram to share your work or talk about your work or trying to engage, build an audience? What would be your advice? So there's sort of two parts to it.
So the multiple exposure course, I realized that, first of all, I love it. And I find it very creative. And so there's probably other people that would love it if they could get into it and understand it as well. like I said, when I first started, all these blend modes in camera, I had no idea what they were. And I had this idea for a while, but like a lot of ideas, I mean, the thing with the ideas isn't having the idea, it's doing it. And so I finally realized that either I should just stop thinking about it or just do it. But just thinking about it and not doing it wasn't getting me anyplace. So I decided to do it. I think it's going to take 3 to 6 months to do. I've started already. I want it to be a very comprehensive resource, starting from the beginning and really understanding what's going on. I think if you really understand it, then you can use it much more to your benefit. So I'm putting that together. If anyone has an interest, they can certainly contact me and I'll let them know when it's available. In terms of the second part, in terms of what you should think about in terms of getting yourself out there to do it, is that, I was once part of a Photoshop and photography course. And like a lot of courses, they had a Facebook page where people would post their work. And a lot of people were posting, and the person said why. People were saying, oh, I'm not good enough and this and that. And the guy said something that stuck with me. The teacher said something that stuck with me. He said, you think if you put something out there that's not good, that people are going to sit there analyzing it and thinking you're an idiot and thinking you don't know what you're doing. People aren't going to do that. They don't have time. If they don't like it, they're just scrolling by. They're not even looking at your name. There's very little downside to putting it out there. And I had one of my painting teachers who said, if you like it, there's going to be somebody else in the world that likes it. It's not just going to be you. So if people don't like it, let them just scroll by. She said there's famous painters that I wouldn't hang on my wall. That the paintings are worth millions, but I wouldn't put it on my wall. And then there are ones that I would. So everybody has different taste. If you don't put it out there, no one's going to see it. Or it's like Brooks Jensen of Lenswork used to always say, if you don't submit it, it'll definitely not get published.
Howard, great talking to you. And of course, maybe you have a new tagline for your website.
The one that you made
Yes.
up. I'm going to have to the trademark to you. The pictures are mine, but the tagline is his. Art for the
Yes.
heart.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, it's truly inspirational. I'll take my imposter who's sitting in my head and put him away and start posting regularly on Instagram. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
And that's a wrap for episode 62. I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, thanks for sticking around for Photo Country. Truly appreciate every one of you who loves photography like I do. Do share this episode with a fellow photography enthusiast. Till the next one, stay safe and keep clicking. This is Rajiv signing off.